right. Well, welcome back to another edition of Inside BBI with John and Eric. And Eric, first off, BBI, as I've been told, Big Blue Interactive. For those of you who do not know, make sure you go bigblueinteractive.com. Eric, we are back with a
Yes.
win.
Yes.
For the love of God, a win.
We're on our way, baby. Let's go.
Championship. So, in all seriousness, I mean, I can honestly say, in our last episode, I did pick them to win 23-21. I thought a defensive score, which almost happened. If Brian Burns picked off that ball instead of dropping it, there was nobody going to catch him. He was clear. He would have gone. That being said, the Giants did manage to score 21 points.
Yes, they broke
Shocking.
they broke the 20-point barrier.
And they did it in the first half, which is all good and bad that we ended at 21. But overall, though, let's kind of look at the game because, I mean, gloom and doom set in across the board before the game. For you, for me, I'm going to let you go first. How much gloom and doom set in 11 seconds into the game?
First of all, how much more fun is this when they win? So this
right.
So this is just great. Everything what is it? The flowers smell more beautiful. What is it? The sun is shining more brightly. Everything's that's what I also want to say this. For Christ's sakes, people on Big Blue Interactive, enjoy the win. Most of you are, but my God, there are a few people out there that are just, you know how we were talking earlier in the year, Daniel is broken. Some of these fans are broken. They can't enjoy a win.
Right.
I mean, enjoy the win. If you can't enjoy the win, then what are we doing? I mean, what is this all about?
Right.
So anyways, my reaction was kind of like what the reaction was in the game thread at the time, even though I did not post in the game thread for my sanity. It was like, you got to be kidding me. So I thought we were toast right there. I really did. I thought, oh my God, this can't get any worse. My wife has kind of gotten into the mode where she doesn't even follow this right now. So I was like, they're already down 7. And she's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, 11 seconds in, they're already down 7. So yeah, it was bad.
That sounds oddly familiar. My wife was leaving. She was going to be going hanging out. We live in a large there's a multi-community piece. Like there's different, I hate to use the term, they called them plantations before. They don't call that anymore, but there are these huge developments here in South Carolina, and we're in one community and we have our own community pool. And so she was going to go with a couple of girlfriends and stuff. And she's like, as she was leaving, she heard me say something. She's like, oh, what's wrong? And I'm like, I'll leave out the expletives. And I'm like, and already losing by 7. She's like, well, wow. She goes 2 minutes into the game. I go, 2 minutes? 11 seconds. And the thing that caught me right off, though, is it's not only that it happened, especially after last week, especially after week 1. It's the fact that it's kind of, once again, it's that Daboll sort of decision-making kind of thing that goes into play. Eric Gray's not a returner. I don't know why we keep playing him as a returner. He provides very little as a returner.
I think this is, again, I wouldn't use him in that role, but I think this is different. But last year he was uncomfortable with fielding this stuff, so it was more like the muffs. It was the drop. So the new kickoff rules are more like actually like a running back play. So he should do better in this. He just fumbled. I mean, he got hit. It wasn't a devastating hit, but it was right on the ball, and you got to hold on to it. Just like Singletary, you've got to hold on to the ball. So I know people are saying, sort of equating it with last year. I don't really do that exactly because I think it's a little bit different because of the new rules. I would like to use different guys back there. I like Tracy in that role because of his he's more of a wide receiver running back hybrid. That was his thing coming out of college, and he's got he's a little more dynamic.
Yeah.
Gray's a little more between the tackles runner. I don't think he suits. I think you're talking about more the turnovers. I'm just talking more. I don't see him breaking a long run. Now watch him do it now that I just said.
Well, it's both really though, because he doesn't provide the wiggle. It's in these new kickoffs, which by the way, I don't know. I'm just
I
not
don't
into.
like them.
I'm
I
just not
don't.
into it. Yeah,
You know.
I know they keep thinking there's going to have bigger returns, but we haven't figured out how to block. That's pretty obvious because you see guys on the opposing defensive teams. They're already like at the 20 by the time Gray is even getting up to like the 15 to 18. But he doesn't provide a lot of wiggle. It's really just I'm going in this direction, and I don't know that turnover though. Yeah, it's just one of those things where you're like, God, can we just have a seasoned returner? Doesn't mean that that guy won't fumble, but
Right.
but to your point, the chances of Gray making this like the 30, the 35, the 40, not great, and anything beyond that, pretty much minuscule at best.
Yeah, I would go back once he's healthy, which may be a long time because of that. Again, I don't know what it is with groin and calf injuries with this team. I don't understand why we keep getting the same kinds of injuries. But if Gunner was back, I would put Gunner and Tyrone Tracy back there. That's what I would do because they're kicking to Eric now because Eric's the least dangerous guy and he has had the fumble issue.
Right.
So, but let's not dwell too much on this because the good news is this you and I thought, and everyone else thought this was going to be a death spiral, but they came out, the defense, the offense came back out and didn't do anything. And the defense, which I want to talk a lot about the defense played great.
Right.
And then the offense kicked it into gear and this could have gone a different way and they didn't let it. I mean, this is a really tough, people are now backtracking saying, well, the Browns aren't that good, blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, yes and no. That's a really, really tough place to win a football game.
Sure.
And that's a good defense. So I've seen people post, well, these were two bad teams, and which one wanted, whatever. That they have a lot of talent on that team, and the Giants at the end of the first half they dominated that game. If you take away the stupid mistake and the fact that Ty Banks didn't get his head turned around, he had great coverage on that play. He just didn't turn around. We blew them out in the first half. I mean, it wasn't even a game.
Right.
So I mean, that was fantastic. And so I was just, it was just that opening 11 seconds in the first half.
I think that's a good point that you bring up. And I know a couple of different people in the site that were saying kind of similar things. This is where I tend to have a problem with some folks' mindset. If you've made up your mind that A is going to equal this, it doesn't matter what happens beyond that. There's always a reason why A is still valid. And leading up to the game, all we kept hearing about was, yeah, the Giants played better offensively against Washington, still lost, played better against Washington, but Washington's defense really bad. This is a legit NFL defense. And then they gave examples of how Dallas really scored a lot of their points off turnovers against the Browns, bad play by the Browns offense, put the Dallas offense in good shape, but they still kicked a lot of field goals. There was a defensive score. So they mentioned all these things and how this was going to be a test. But then when the Giants actually start moving the ball down the field, these are two bad teams.
Yeah,
and it's
exactly.
Like, I'm like, okay, come
drives
on.
me crazy. It drives me crazy. Now, look, the good news in this, and this is going to lead up to the Dallas game. So, all right. So, what was my whole thing coming up to this point in the podcast series? Heaven help us if we're 0-3 heading into the Dallas game. Okay. So we're not 0-3. We should be 2-1. I'm still pissed off about last week.
Yep,
I mean,
agreed.
that could come back and really haunt us. But now the Dallas game is looking like a completely different animal right now. And this ties in with what I'm going to get to with this week is we're starting to see the Giants, what happens when your team does better at the line of scrimmage on both sides. So,
yes.
So Cleveland up front embarrasses people. The Giant, I mean, in this game, you could kind of argue the weak link on the offensive line was Andrew Thomas, but he was playing against Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. But when I rewatched the game, I kept going, where's that pressure coming from? And Andrew didn't have a great game, but he held his own against a fantastic opponent, and the rest of the line did well. And they weren't great, kind of like the Commanders game. Like they weren't great, but they didn't let a team that could have wrecked them. Last year's line against this defense, we would have had
the game's over.
We would have had the 8 sacks on us.
Yeah.
So, the line did well, and then on the other side of the ball, we finally, and hopefully this is a thing, a positive thing going forward. Our front seven dominated this line of scrimmage. Everyone's focusing on the 8 sacks, but Cleveland couldn't run the ball on us.
Right.
We gave up 215 yards against the Commanders. I think the Cleveland running backs, I'm not going to count the quarterback, had like 40 or 42 yards rushing in that game. And there was one run where I wasn't happy where the running back broke tackles. And that was followed up in another run where the quarterback broke a bunch of tackles. That was I think it was in the fourth quarter. It was the last I think it was the last touchdown drive of the game. I think it was on that drive. But we're seeing what happens now when a football team can control the front. And when you can control the front, good things happen. So that's what I took out of this game. And I got a lot of good things to say about Daniel. I got a lot of things good to say about the defense. Malik Nabers, we got to talk about Malik Nabers, but there's a lot of great stuff in this game.
Yeah, I would say one of the big things too is we were, and again, woulda, coulda, shoulda. We were a hair away from this game being a complete blowout in our favor. Jones just misses Nabers on a deep pass that Nabers is open. If he gets it to Nabers on the run, that's a touchdown.
Yeah.
There was another deep pass to Hyatt. Hyatt had the inside of the man. If Jones just gives it to him, instead he leads him too far, which I didn't think he could overthrow Hyatt, but he managed to overthrow Hyatt.
But at least he didn't underthrow him.
That's true.
At least he didn't underthrow him.
That's true. But that's another big play there. There was a couple of, I don't want to necessarily say questionable holding calls, but certainly some things that the refs could have maybe just kept the flag in. I thought Bellinger, while he did have a good hold, he was in between the shoulders. Usually if you're holding within the chest plate and driving your man backwards, that's allowed. I think once Jones got to the outside, though, Bellinger needed to just let go. Instead, he threw him down, and that shows you holding the jersey still. That was too bad. That cost us there. So there were a couple of small things that could have turned what was 21 to 7 at that point in time, could have easily been 28 or 31, depending on what we ultimately ended up doing on one of the other ones.
And we were moving the ball again when Singletary fumbled too. There were things.
Another one.
Again, I'm hoping they clean these things up.
Sure.
But this was a good win. And if Cleveland had come back and won this game, what a shame it would have been, because they weren't playing better than the Giants were. That first 7 points was a gift to them. And so they really only had that short field touchdown in my mind, the one where they started the drive at their 49,
right,
or the Giants 49 yards,
right,
and they went 49 yards, and it was really those two plays. So good. I mean, it was good. We broke the 20-point, and I want to talk about this. I don't think Daniel Jones is getting enough credit for this game. I saw a lot of people say, really, I mean, a good first half, terrible second half. So I went back and rewatched the game, and I have a completely different take on this. I thought he played really good in the first half. I would have liked him to connect on the deep ball to Hyatt, like you said.
Yep.
The interception, it does look like the tight end sort of stopped. So I don't know who's the blame there on that interception that was called back, thankfully. But it looked like Theo Johnson sort of stopped his route. So I'm not really sure. So that colors this a little bit. But he was 17 of 19 with a quarterback rating of 140. And what I was really impressed with him in this game was, and I want to talk about the second half in a second. What I was really impressed in this game with him that I didn't see anyone talk about was his movement. That he's running both away from pressure and running scramble yards, or when he sees something open, he's taking off. Like he's not coming off a knee injury. So I thought he was very dynamic with the ball in his hands. And there could have been a play could have been an utter disaster for us. That bad snap that went over his head.
Yep.
And that ball bounced, and he caught it off on the bounce off the turf, and he threw the ball away. And that could have been a turnover there. That could have been him throwing the ball up for grabs. And in the second half, I saw a lot of comments about the Giants went conservative. I didn't see that at all. I thought the Giants stayed really aggressive with their play calling, except one series when the one leading up to the field goal attempt that was missed. They got real conservative on that. and I can understand why they did, but I didn't like the play calling there.
Yeah.
But they took their shots throughout the third quarter, including on first down. And there was either penalties or there was pressure or something happened. I'd have to go back. I kept watching and I was like, well, that's not the play call. That's not the, that what, or, it was something came up each time, but it wasn't like what they got in. They got really conservative. I think fans sometimes confuse lack of execution with being conservative. And I didn't think the play calling was conservative in the second half. I actually thought it was fairly aggressive. Look, play call you're talking about, for instance, with Malik Nabers, where he overthrew him. That was in the second half, and then the very next play they went back.
They went right back to him. Yep.
Yeah.
So
there was a lot of that.
I will say one of the things though that there's a lot of positives. So I'm on the positive side of things of this, but there's a couple things that seem glaringly obvious to me that I'm kind of confused on why and it doesn't seem to be obvious to the Giants coaching staff. We do certain personnel packages that absolutely tip off what we're going to do. And when you'd only put Hyatt in for like what I think it was 14 snaps.
That was obvious. So
when you bring them in for 14 snaps, and you don't have other players of similar nature on the field at the same time, it's either I'm throwing it to him or he's a decoy and we're running. There are other packages where we go 3 tight ends and you've limited yourself to either it's a Jones handoff or a Jones possible run, or it's a very short pass to somebody else because you've only got the one legitimate receiver. And as long as we lock him down, the rest is there. I thought they tipped themselves off horribly. And it's in the second half. It's on the pass that was almost intercepted. I knew what they were going to do before that ball was snapped. I looked at the way they lined up. And who was out there?
The one that we were throwing out of the end zone?
Out of the end zone, and he almost gets it intercepted.
Yeah.
The second they lined up in that formation and those guys, I'm like, dear God, don't do what I think you're going to do. Just run it or scramble and throw to the right. Don't pretend, because when you fake that little bit and you're big, you've left yourself with only a couple of options on the outside and one of those tight ends to leak out. And one of the things that Myles Garrett said when they had talked to him after the game, they said, what was the difference between the first half and the second half defensively? He's like, you can only do those screens and quick passes so long before we figure it out of what you're trying to do. And that's what I feel like our personnel packages tip off what we're going to do a little bit too much. And so I think they need to keep that in mind, because you can do the same thing, but you can't always line up the same way, or you're just telling people what you're going to do.
I beg to differ with Myles Garrett, because he obviously didn't see how the Commanders played the Giants, and we never figured.
That might say more about us than it does about them.
No, but I agree with what you're saying. I also want to comment because you made me think of this too. You and I gave Daniel all kinds of grief.
Sure.
In Minnesota because he couldn't throw a swing pass. He was really good throwing hitting backs out of the backfield in this game, and the screen game was working for the Giants, and there was one play where he was going to get clobbered, and I don't know how he got the ball to Singletary, and it was a great throw. It really was a great throw. I think it was in the second half, but I have to go back.
No, it's in the first half. I want to say it's on the second touchdown drive.
Okay. Yep. But there were a number of times where he didn't have a clean pocket. Sometimes he did, but there was more pressure than you would think when you look at the sack totals. And one of the sacks was on, at least one was unblocked. We gave up 2 sacks. I know one was completely unblocked. How did we give up the second sack? It might have been unblocked as well. I'd have to go back, but I know at least one of the sacks. So it wasn't there were like huge breakdowns up front or anything like that, but there was pressure. He had to move around, and I kept thinking he doesn't move. He's not moving around like a guy coming off an ACL. He didn't look like he was nervous to get hit, and I thought he made good decisions when to run the football too. And some of his runs were called back with, like, one of the tight end penalties was a Daniel Jones run that picked up good yards.
Yeah, there were two actually of his that got called back. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, his numbers would have looked even better. But yeah, I agree with you. I think they have to be careful. It's kind of like when Kadarius Toney was here and they brought in Kadarius Toney. You kind of knew they were gonna throw the ball to him some way or have him run, do an end
Reverse or
around or
something.
something
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, you kind of knew that. So they got to be careful with Hyatt with that because Hyatt comes in, oh, they're going to throw deep. Look out. So yeah,
What did you think of the play call in the first half of going Wildcat with Neighbors and putting Jones in motion? While it didn't work, and that makes it easy to say, oh, that was a bad call because it didn't work. My thought was there wasn't really a need to do that right at that moment. You're really starting to dictate how you want things happening here. And I thought you had other options to get that same kind of what are they going to do versus putting Neighbors in, because you kind of tipped your hand in a spot that left you being so close to the goal line. There really isn't a big, if Jones doesn't get open immediately, that play has no chance of going anywhere.
You're asking the wrong guy because I'm so old with this stuff. I have a history of not seeing the Giants. The Giants this stuff never seems to work for us.
Right.
So I'm not for want to run those kinds of plays. If it worked, we'd be going, what a great play call. I didn't like it because, like you said, we were moving the ball like it cute. I didn't like it there. If it worked, we would have had a different opinion on it. They did run a play and during Daniel Bellinger's rookie year where they did an end around to him that he actually was supposed to throw, but I think he ran it in, and that worked. And at the time, I thought, what a cool play that was.
Right.
So I didn't like it, but I thought the play calling was good though yesterday. I really did.
Sure.
I thought they and I kind of disagree a little bit with Myles Garrett was saying. I think the Giants had opportunities to do some things and just missed them. And they just missed that connection, like with Wan'Dale Robinson over the middle on that play.
Yeah.
It was either, I thought the pass was kind of there. I didn't look at from the all 22. I'd like to get a closer look at to see what happened there because I thought Robinson should have had it. Maybe it's just a function of the fact he doesn't have long enough arms. I
Yeah.
don't know. But
I think him being shorter, that's a hard reach to catch for him. It was pretty borderline. I think it's 50-50 on whether he could have made it or it could have been a better throw. I think it's that close, but it was a tough catch.
Yeah, and I wanted to also bring this up before I forget too, because I know we're going to have a guest on soon too, and so we're gonna be pressed for time here. But we should talk about Malik Nabers, but before we get to Malik Nabers, I don't want Wan'Dale Robinson to get lost in conversation here because he had a really good game and he had a lot of really important catches to keep drives alive in the game. I mean, the 2nd and 16 play where he picked up 20 was huge. There was another play where he got leveled and I thought, oh man, he's not getting up. And he was just, and that was a short catch with a great run after the catch too.
Yeah.
And if he starts getting into rhythm with Daniel plus Malik, then we really got something going there. And I will say this: I saw a lot of people being very negative on Theo Johnson. We saw why Theo Johnson can help us because when he caught that short pass, he immediately accelerated up the field. I mean, his acceleration for a tight end on that play was pretty darn impressive. I mean, again, Bellinger had a really nice catch in the game, but he can't accelerate like Theo Johnson did on that play. So if Theo can, and the people are going, Theo needs to get out of there. He's over his head. The only way he gets better is if he plays. So the fact that he's playing as much as he is great for his development in my mind. And I don't want to compare him because he's a living legend, but people will forget that Mark Bavaro made an impact early because he had to, because he was forced in the lineup, but he didn't really start making big plays until later into the season, midway and further into the season. When you're a young tight end, it takes time to get sort of into rhythm and learn how to do things. So I'm thrilled he's playing, and I think we saw a little glimpse of what he can do if he can stop dropping the pass and there's no holding penalties and things like that.
And he shouldn't be there. Okay, well, who should? Because your options are Bellinger and Manhurts. So neither
some people are saying Bellinger should play right now over him. I just think Theo's upside is so good. You want to develop him.
He just needs to perform. He's made some mistakes. He's dropped the ball. He's got to get out of his own head a little bit. The end zone pass, Jones could have thrown out a little bit better. It was a little long and he's one-handed, but that still would have been a really nice catch to make. He did get his hand on it, did get his second hand to just kind of knock it away. I wish Jones had made it just a little bit better for him, but it is what it is. One of the things I wanted to talk about, going back to Robinson, and we talked about it during the summer. I think he's an X factor that a lot of people are really not.
Mhm.
They're not thinking enough about. If Hyatt
Yeah.
were playing what you thought he would be right now, which is a deep threat, a guy who's really going to step his game up. If Hyatt did that, because I don't think Slayton brings that extra piece that Hyatt could bring, then all of a sudden that underneath stuff becomes very open. He
Oh,
becomes a
sure. Yeah.
one-on-one and he's going to exploit it. Right now, it becomes pretty obvious that on those third and medium range, we're looking to get it to either Nabers, obviously, or it's going to Robinson. Those are the two guys we keep looking for on critical third down plays. That's going to be a little bit tough, though, if you keep doing that. Sooner or later, teams are going to roll everything to those guys. You're going to have to find other people. But I think if we had that second main wide receiver who could pull coverage back, or the tight end that could eat the seam, Robinson would eat up underneath, and he's doing a really good job.
But they're getting there. So Singletary didn't have big numbers until that long run at the end, but he was a big factor catching the ball. So they've got a back who can catch the ball. Tracy, as I wrote about in the game preview, they're starting to use more and more. I think Tracy's going to be an X factor moving forward. So they've got two running backs that can catch out of the backfield. So that they can use, that can be a factor. Theo Johnson's another guy who I think he's going to start, here and there. He's going to make more noise. So I don't worry as much. Malik is good. I mean, we're almost like I almost think like we're not talking about him enough. That I also don't think he has played his A game yet.
No,
I still think he's kind of left some plays on the field with some drops. We haven't seen that deep. We know he can do the 80-yard stuff, and we haven't seen that yet. But I don't think so. What I'm saying is we haven't seen his A game yet, and yet he's doing. He just made history. I forget the exact stat, but they put up some stat about 200 and something yards, 3 touchdowns. He's the first
20 plus receptions in his first 3 games.
I don't think he's played his A game yet. I mean, so roll your coverage to him. He's still going to get his catches. I mean, so right now the missing guy. I think the guy who I wish he would start making more plays is Slayton. So if you're going to put Slayton, they obviously like Slayton more. I'm not trying to diss him, but there should be some more opportunities there for Slayton because people have got to be paying attention. So Cleveland had to be like, all right, after the first half, we got to do something about Nabers. So that really should have opened something up for Slayton in the second half of that game. I wish that there's opportunities there. So if he doesn't take advantage of them, then maybe that's where Hyatt gets back in. So I don't. And then on the flip side, because again, I know we're pressed for time.
Yeah, that's fine.
I want to talk about the defense. 8 sacks. Now, the official game book said 17 hits. Brian Baldinger said 15 hits. I don't know what the difference is, but the official NFL game book said 17 hits on the quarterback, 8 sacks spread over 9 different players because there were half sacks in there. We could talk about each of those guys having some of their best games. I mean, Thibodeau really made a hell of a play on the play before the 4th and 1 stop where he got into the shot in the gap and stopped. It was 3rd and 1 and he shot into I don't know how he got through there, but he got in there and nailed the guy in the backfield. And then the next play, Dexter Lawrence gets him and holds him. But Nunez Roches had caused that because he'd broken. We could go down. And Elijah Chapman had his best game. Brian Burns, probably maybe the play of the game was the turnover touchdown. I mean turnover.
That was
strip sack. Yep. That sets up the 21-7 lead going into the half. That was a huge play. And in Cleveland, I know they were having offensive line issues, but they did get one of their tackles back. Conklin did not play. They had an issue at center, which Dexter Lawrence took advantage of. And I saw some people go, well, they didn't have the offense. Boo-hoo. I mean, I don't care. That's happened to us before. I don't care. We took advantage of it. So the defense, I thought, dominated this game.
First off, the tackle Willis did play, so that
Yeah,
was one of the two tackles. He got
yeah,
hurt later, but that was in the second half. So
yeah.
their offensive line was really starting to fall apart later in the game. But the fact is, we played against who was out there. You don't have an option, and those tackles were missing in the previous game to beat Jacksonville. So I don't want to hear, oh, they're missing this and they're missing that. That stuff happens. I mean, you play get the Rams are missing a whole bunch of players on their offensive line. They just beat the 49ers. Does
Right.
it
Yeah.
happens? You still have to play.
I'm not gonna. This kind of nitpicking, complaining after a win, where the one side of when you do really well someplace, you can. I don't have a problem with somebody saying, "Ah, we played really great," but we have to keep in mind that it was. That's to me, that's reasonable. But to say, "Nah, you can't count this. This doesn't matter because it was who we were playing." I mean, that to me, that comes across to me as somebody who's addicted to complaining. And my wife calls me the bitcher. So I've got
Nice.
when the bitcher thinks that other people are bitching too much, you know it's bad.
Yeah, and
So
I think again, if you think something is this, any data or any possible evidence that goes against that will be negated or ignored, and there will be a different reason why this still stays the same if you're that committed to your opinion and feeling on a certain thing. I get really tired with the over. So we can talk about it in depth in a different episode, but if you look at the Giants overall, you look across the NFL, right? I think there are a number of teams right now. I'm gonna get shit. I'm gonna get shit on when after I say this. There are a number of teams in the NFL right now that would trade to have not trade assets for the contract, but would trade positions to have Jones be their quarterback right. Well, Miami would kill to be able to throw Daniel Jones back there with their targets and everything that they have right now if they didn't have to eat that contract because they need the help. They don't have a quarterback. Carolina just benched their number one pick and put Andy Dalton back in because they needed a quarterback. Jones has played pretty darn well
yeah,
overall.
and we need to emphasize because we've given a lot of crap. So what did we say last week? We said he played well against the Commanders, but it's the Commanders, and he always
Right.
plays well against the Commanders. So he's going to have to go into a show he can do it 2 weeks in a row, and he's going to have to go a much different defense. He's going to be under heat, and he's going to be throwing against a different secondary. And are we going to see him regress to the Minnesota Viking form that he played in the opener?
Right.
No,
Right.
he didn't. He had another good game. And again, I challenge people to go back and look at that second half. It's not what you think it was, with the play calling. So there were the only throw that made me nervous was, and he got hit, I think, when he was throwing. It was the one that
Yes.
you were talking about when he was
Yeah.
throwing out of the end zone. I was like, and thank God, Malik Nabers played defensive back there. But that could have been trouble. But I thought Daniel played well, and then so big picture is this: Daniel's played two good games in a row. The defense, coming off two terrible games, played a great game. Devin Singletary, if you can get rid of the fumble, looks like the real deal. I'm very happy with our running
Sure.
back situation right now. The offensive line looks like the real deal. So now we got to worry about injuries creeping up a little bit and we'll talk about this more probably later in the week with the cornerback situation, because we
Yep.
got a couple of corners now banged up, and now Andrew Thomas also got rolled late in the game, which I didn't pick up on until today. And so the last time he faced Micah Parsons, he was playing with a bum ankle, I think, too, and that didn't go well for him. So, but big picture, quarterbacks playing better, defense is coming on. One really good games. One game doesn't make a trend. We'll have to see again. Can they do it against Dallas? We can run the ball. We have a good offensive line. So, and now, things didn't go our way with the Eagles and Saints, but it
Oh,
did go our way with the Cowboys yesterday. So this thing is not this thing's different than it was just a week ago. Week
yeah.
ago. No, after Thursday, we might be back to the Hindenburg over my shoulder, but right now I'm like, yay!
What
So we have something positive.
what we saw yesterday was a in the past a team that I don't think was overly resilient to really bad things. They were very resilient. They started off very poorly. And that, considering the bad play against Minnesota, the loss in a game they should have won, that kind of play, especially if a season, and it's something I want to ask, Dan Duggan is going to be our guest when he does come on. Something I want to ask is the concept that there was a lot of rumors out there that the Daboll was losing the locker room. In fact, we're going to take a break, and then we'll be bringing Dan on. So we'll take a break right now, and then we'll have Dan on in just a moment. All right, so welcome back to Inside BBI with John and Eric, and joining us right now is Dan Duggan of The Athletic, who covers the Giants. And Dan, you finally got to cover a victory that's got to be a little bit different than what we've been seeing the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, it was a welcome change. As much as everyone, thinks we root against the team. Winning locker rooms are always a lot more fun. Not even just after the game, you kind of get better stories. But during the week, people are in a better mood. Easier to write a feature story when, like no one wants to read a glowing feature when the team's, in a 3 or 4 game losing streak. So, yeah, so it's nice to just get a little bit of a change up there, a little breath of fresh air on Sunday.
Nice. And then it's funny that you mentioned that. I was going to ask you that. So I'll just ask you that real quick. How hard is it sometimes when you're putting out, and obviously you got to constantly you're putting out content. So whether it's on X or whether, it's just part of an overall article that you're doing, the fact is you have to kind of tell what's happening right now. How hard is it to deal with people who constantly go, oh man, you're just negative. You're just negative. But that's kind of what you're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I have a pretty easy rebuttal to that. I mean, I've covered the team since 2016. Would you expect a lot of positive coverage in that time span? It's like I wasn't even here for the glory days. And like, it'd be one thing if you're covering a team that's winning every year, and then people say you're negative. Well, then they might have a point because, like, listen, I'm from Boston. I see it with Bill Belichick would be getting picked apart at times. It's like, you're not gonna give the benefit of the doubt to the guy with all the Super Bowl rings.
Right.
I mean, I've covered a lot of losing, a lot of bad seasons. So again, it'd be almost odd if you're like, wow, that Dan's really positive in his coverage because there hasn't been a lot of positive things to cover. I mean, and I always say this also is like the team dictates the tone of the coverage. I think if people go back and read my stories from 2022 season, they probably think, oh, this was pretty positive. It's just kind of how it goes. Obviously, the play on the field dictates the coverage. So I mean, if my coverage has been negative, it's because the product has been negative for the bulk of my time on the beat.
I've actually wondered about that with Dan too, is because he came in 2016. I thought, oh, the poor guy, he just never covered anything but the team being awful. So it's kind of like with my kids. Well, I shouldn't say kids now. They're adults, but they're one's 21 and one's 18, but they've never seen the Giants win. So they have a negative impression of them. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's obviously been a sea change here. I mean, I think Jordan might have it the worst because I think he came on the beat in like 2013. So he caught just the start of the decline, and he's been in even 2016, my first year. I was like, 11 wins. Like 2017, I'm thinking this is a potential Super Bowl contender. And obviously the air came out of that balloon pretty quick. And hasn't been a lot of those feelings since, that's for sure.
And the other thing that you guys have to deal with, and I don't know how you do this. I had to get off of it because it was just so toxic, was the responses on Twitter. I just, I go into like your feed or I go into Art's feed or Jordan's feed, and I'm like, oh my goodness, how I don't know if you guys read those comments or not, but it's so toxic that it's got to be painful at times, I think, for you guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, the mute button is a useful tool.
Yeah, right.
I don't block. I have a firm no block policy. I don't want to restrict people from reading my stuff. I just don't care to read your stuff. And I like one of my big things I try, it's funny, the name of your site, I try to be interactive. I think that's an important thing. Like if I was a fan, I'd want to be able to get in touch with the people that are on the team all the time. So I think some people kind of have their nose in the air in the media, like, oh, I'm not going to respond to people. I think that's important. So if people come to me with questions, respectful criticisms, comments, right, I'll gladly engage in it. It's just when people like, there's certain people that just troll you or have like really like attack you and stuff, I just mute them and it's fine. It's funny. It shows how pathetic those people are because sometimes, someone will reply to them and I'll see the reply. Like, what's this reply to? And then you go up and you're like, oh my God, that person is still replying to my tweets. I have like 6 years ago. And then you realize that they've been replying to me for 6 years into the void. I have no idea it's even happening unless that happens. So, so that's my approach to it. I used to, when I was younger, I would get back into it and I'd battle with people. That's a colossal waste of energy. Definitely eliminated that for my mental health and just being efficient with time because you can do that all day. But yeah, but like on a Monday, it's hard. Like I'll get distracted because I'll go into little Twitter rabbit holes, and again, like I think people get excited whether it's a win or a loss. They want to engage. So I'm happy to do it. If I'm at the airport, if I'm, on the cab ride home. But I definitely try to just kind of steer clear because some people it's not even constructive. They're just being negative for the sake of being negative.
Right.
There's no sense engaging. But people who are like genuinely interested in interacting, I try to do that as best I can.
Yeah.
I think the extremes, right? We see it in other areas, things we don't talk about, the areas we don't bring in, like you don't talk about religion or politics at work and things like that, which we try to avoid like the plague. They're the extremes. And no matter what evidence is presented that might be contra to your perceived, current mindset, it gets ignored, and then the person bringing it up gets bashed as if. So when you mention anything negative, a very positive person who always thinks the Giants can't do anything wrong takes that as you're just anti-Giants. If they do something well, Jones, for instance, and you comment, hey, Jones actually played pretty well, all of a sudden every naysayer and hater comes out of the woods to tell you why all those things are wrong. The happy medium is so difficult for you guys to really say, because the NFL is made up of a bunch of teams that are very similar. Not a lot of difference there between a 5-win team and a 10-win team.
Yeah, I mean, while you were leading into that comment / question, Daniel Jones was the only thing going through my head because it's like he's so radioactive on social media. You could just I could type his name in right now on Twitter and just Daniel Jones, period. I'd have like 50 comments reply. You know what I mean? Just because people have their minds so made up, no matter what you say about him, they're going to reply with the same vigor, whether it's positive or negative. And it's funny because the craziest complaint I'll get, it's like this is almost more on the Athletic than on Twitter. And I mean, the Athletic comment section, I think, is a healthier place than Twitter, but it's still a comment section. And I'll write a story about Daniel Jones, like, oh, another story about the quarterback. What are you writing about the quarterback? Well, it's like, take a step back. It's the quarterback.
It's the quarterback, yeah.
So journalism one is you can't write the quarterback enough. But with Jones, he's just become so polarized. And Eli was like this, especially when I came in. By the end there, people were dug into stances on him, where some people thought he could do no wrong. Some people thought, he was cooked. And it's like, I have to cover the quarterback of the team, guys. And I'll put out a disclaimer, I think, every year during camp. Like, I'm going to evaluate how Daniel Jones did on August 4th, the 5th day of training camp. That does not mean they should cut him tomorrow or give him an extension. Like, you just have to evaluate and analyze what you're seeing. And again, like, he is the lightning rod for this team right now. Anything you say about him is going to just create, and it's kind of tired though, because everyone's so dug in on this. It's just going to create a predictable reaction. But at the same time, I have to write about the quarterback. I can't come out of the game and say, oh, John Runyon, let me give you 1,500 words on how he played. It's the quarterback's going to drive the discussion.
Right before you came on, we were talking about this very thing. We said we were very negative, understandably, about Jones's performance in the opener, and he played better against the Commanders, as he's apt to do. And we had talked about all week that this was going to be a really good test for him in the offense, given the quality of the defense. And was he going to regress, or was he going to play? And not only did he play a really good first half, going back and rewatching the second half, I actually think they missed some opportunities there. Not just him, but I think he played a better game than he's even given credit for. So what we were talking about was this: we criticized him, but now we have to give him credit for the last 2 games. He hasn't been a problem, and John was actually saying there are probably some teams out there right now, like a Miami, who would be okay with Daniel Jones. So, and my point here is this: it's just to support what you're saying. Is you got to call it like you see it, and be as honest as you can with what you're seeing, and not try to defend a position. And I think we're all in the same boat on that.
Right. And again, it's charged with him. And, and the Hard Knocks thing where, like, I was entertained by that, but then you step back and it's like, those comments that Joe Schoen made, like, we all might have known these discussions were going on. The fact that we all got to see it and hear some of the internal discussions, and see, he said things there that he's maybe alluded to in press conferences, but like when he just lays out, like, this is it, like, DJ's either going to prove he's the guy or we're going to pivot. Like, he's never put it that plainly in a press conference. So that type of thing hangs over every Daniel Jones, game, practice, whatever. So that just kind of raises the stakes. So I think what he's really competing against here is, like, is he going to be worth I think it's like $41 million cap hit next year? That's really what it is. Like, he can play a decent game against Washington, a better game yesterday, and it's still going to be like, at the end of the day, when they get to the end of the season, are they going to want to, I guess they don't have to commit, just kind of continue their commitment to him? Because, I mean, obviously we've all spoken ad nauseum about how head that out after this year where they can pull the plug. So like I think it's just totally changed the prism of how we're viewing him this year. Like 2 years ago when he had the kind of breakout year to get the extension, it was kind of like, all right, he's fighting for his job, gets him to the playoffs, they're going to reward him. Now, obviously, in hindsight, I think a lot of people say, oh, they never should have done that. But that was kind of how that season was viewed. It's viewed totally different. It's like he has to live up to a bar now, whereas the bar was kind of removed, in 2022. Now it's like you can't just be good. You have to be, good enough that they really believe you can be this franchise guy that they were hoping you'd be 2 years ago. Obviously, it went off track, but he can't just be pretty good this year. He has to be great to justify, I think, kind of continuing on. So that adds to the entire narrative around him.
Right.
You sort of preempted one of my questions almost exactly, because I was going to bring up the Hard Knocks comments with Shane, with Daniel, in that it's got to be very difficult for Daniel in this sense, because it's clear as day right now what their organization's honest appraisal of him is, and the mental pressure on him, which was great as it was anyways, is now even higher, because now he knows that the organization is basically saying this is it. And they made it public and it's out there. And so my question was going originally to you was going to be, given the fact that you saw Hard Knocks and you saw what their comments were with Daniel Jones, and now we don't know what's going to happen, but do you still see this sort of playing out like he's probably on his way out? This is the last year? Or, I mean, if you were a betting man, again, if he plays all pro level, they're not going to get rid of him. But do you have a gut feeling about what direction you think this is going?
Yeah, I mean, the gut feeling is it's over, because I think the deck is stacked so much against him. He has to push back against it. It's not like it's down the middle. Again, they were willing to trade up whatever the package they would have done. If they traded up for the number 3 pick, obviously that was it. Like maybe he was going to get this year to be the bridge, kind of be the Jacoby Brissett role, who's is doing that for basically keeping the seat warm for Drake May. I mean, to your point, if he plays like an all-pro, it's not a discussion, but I don't think anyone expects him to play like an all-pro. I don't think anyone expects him to play like he did last year. If he's somewhere in that middle ground, I think we kind of know that that's not good enough, for what Joe Schoen wants. So I think if they end up in that similar, even if it's a 2022 season, I don't think that's good enough. I think that they would say, like, it's been long enough. We're kind of just spinning our wheels at that point. So unless he, really turns it on here and has a Pro Bowl level season, they win 10 games, they go to the playoffs again, then obviously that would force their hand, I think. And I mean, he is on the book, so you just keep him. But if it's anything less than that, I just don't see them bringing him back. Because again, they went this far down the aisle to move on from him after he started 6 games after that contract, which is amazing when you step back and think about it. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that he was getting, the curtain call against the Colts and the Vikings. And then he finished 4 games last year and they were ready to move on. So, yeah, I think the deck is so stacked against him. Now, again, the beauty of the situation for him is he does control his own fate to an extent. If he plays great, he takes the decision out of the hands. It's just if he plays somewhere in that middle ground, which is probably the most likely outcome, I just have to think they're going to lean, to kind of finally pull the cord and go another direction.
So I want to kind of get off the Jones things for a second. I want to go back to last week before we hit the Browns real quick. There was a lot of talk, and it doesn't matter who brought it up, but I think Jordan was the first one to really brought up. There's this thought in the locker room that Daboll might be losing the locker room slightly. And then it was also kind of tied directly to Jalen Hyatt supposedly asked to be traded during the summer because he was unhappy with how he's being used. I have heard people indicate something happened after the Houston preseason game, but in your thoughts, and again, I'm not asking you to go against somebody else's stuff, but your opinion, what you've seen, were you getting kind of inklings that there's some people in the locker room that are a little unhappy and a couple more losses could send it in that direction?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll tread carefully because I love this type of discussion. I also don't want to really critique a colleague's report, but I think it's a valid conversation. So let me just speak to what I can say, and I have more thoughts on the Hyatt one. The losing locker room, that was on his podcast. It sounded like he talked to a few players, said kind of like if things continue this direction. I think his phrase was it's hanging by a thread. Well, they win on Sunday, so all of a sudden the vibes are good. They win on Thursday, the vibes are gonna be good again. I don't know that he didn't report like he's lost the locker room, that leaders are tuning him out. It was more just I think he talked to a few guys who said, it could go that way. So I don't put a ton into that. I mean, I think it's tea leaf reading or maybe just predicting what could happen. And I don't think, I've been around long enough. The coach can keep the ship righted for only so long. And last year, I think Daboll did a good job where it didn't go off the rails, where it certainly looked like it was going to. After that Dallas game, actually, it was like, they 2-8 at that point. It looked like all hope was lost, and they finished strong. I don't know if you can keep doing that year after year. You are going to start to lose guys. But so I'll kind of put that to the side because again, it's really early. They won yesterday. Everyone's feeling good. The Hyatt one is interesting because everyone latched on to the part that was, we were kind of busting Jordan's chops that he buried the trade part like deep into that story. It's like, come on, man, let's get that up top. That's just a journalism thing. But so like that, and then it got spun into like he demanded a trade, and so Daboll very specifically refuted, like he never said that to me. But if you read the report, it didn't say that like Hyatt went into Daboll's office and demanded a trade. It sounded like he's probably frustrated in practice, not getting reps with the first team, because that definitely happened. We saw that after that Texans game. He went from being the #2 wide receiver to all of a sudden Darius Slayton jumped him on the depth chart. It was asked about the time. Daboll kind of downplayed it, but then now we've seen enough games to know that was not a temporary switch. Like Slayton passed him on the depth chart. So, and then Daboll even said, like, you know, you can ask Jalen about it. And I will say one thing about this regime, they are very proactive about kind of combating like narratives or negativity. So we go in the locker room. Sometimes a guy in a Hyatt situation could, you know, he'd be hiding out in the training room for the 45 minutes we're in there, and he doesn't face the music. He was front and center, and you know, he came out pretty forcefully saying, "Oh, it's fake news, all this stuff." I mean, again, I didn't report the story. I've been around long enough. There's zero chance Jordan made that up. Now, it's an anecdote. He heard it from a few sources. I mean, again, you can maybe there's a game of telephone or semantics. Like, there's no way he made that. I mean, Hyatt has admitted he's disgruntled. I mean, how would he not be? He played 10 snaps. Sure. He doesn't have what's it, 0 catches, I think, in 3 games.
Yeah.
He's disgruntled. So if we're just going to hinge it on, oh, he didn't request a trade, it's like, again, that's where it's like a little bit of semantics. Like, I mean, it's not inconceivable to me at all that he said, you know, give me the ball, I trade me like that in the heat of the battle of practice. Because that's what the report was. And again, like the thing that drives me crazy, and again, this is just as a reporter and Jordan's a friend, but like people are like, oh, he made it up. Like, that's just the most ridiculous notion that I see all the time from fans. Right. So I'll explain this because I think this is a good form, because I feel like your site is great because it's football, but there is like, it's like a media analysis subtext to it. Like, I got a wife and 2 kids. Jordan has the same arrangements. You got mortgage payments, car payments. I'm not making anything up, because if I make something up and I get caught one time, I lose my job. Like, the juice is not worth the squeeze at all. Like, if I was going to make something up, it would have to be something that's going to get me like a $10 million payout, because it'd be the biggest news ever. And, you know, every outlet would just pay me $1 million cash for having it. You know, I'm making a ludicrous comparison because it just doesn't happen. It would never happen. Again, we get things wrong. That can happen. But the making up thing is just so silly. And again, he's at ESPN. He's going to make up a story about the Giants' #4 wide receiver. Like, that ain't getting him on SportsCenter, a Jalen Hyatt trade request. Right. So I'm glad you asked me that, because it did irk me that, like, again, I get it. Like, fake news has become the buzzword in the last like decade. And again, as you alluded to earlier, John, like, that's not just a sports world thing. Obviously it started and it just invaded everything. But like, I just think if people step back and think critically about that, why would a reporter ever make something up? Now, again, they could get something wrong. They could have a bad source. But just making something up would be such a ludicrous thing to do. Because again, our livelihood basically hinges on us having credibility. And if you make something up and get caught, it's over. Like, you know, you could be the worst reporter in the world. You might be able to hold on your job. If you make something up and get caught, you're out. So again, it's just that to me is like, when I see that, like, that one really strikes a nerve with me. You can say whatever you want. Oh, this guy's just a hack. He's negative. He's this, that. But making stuff up is just really a dumb concept if you really think about it.
Right.
Yeah, and I thought, sorry, Eric, and I thought quite honestly, it's a bad look for Hyatt, even if it's even if it was embellished slightly. Like, if someone else said it and shared it and it was embellished slightly, when you go back and look at the video leading into, I think it was the combine, he was working out with the Cowboys coach, and he's kind of like, the Cowboys coach says it, he goes, well, what am I? What kind of receiver am I? And he kept saying that, and I'm like, it's kind of arrogant for a guy who a lot of people think you're just fast. So you might want to, you know, temper that. This kind of fits. Is that the problem right now with Hyatt, and specifically, he's really limited in terms of what he can do at the receiver position. And so the Giants are trying to force him in as the go deep guy, but his route running hasn't developed the way they thought it would, or at least from an outsider's perspective.
Yeah, no, I mean, 1,000%. It's a football decision. Like, I've seen a lot of speculation, unless again, maybe I have my head in the sand. Like, he's a good kid. Like, he's young. So like, maybe he's a little immature about certain things, but he's a good kid. Like, I haven't heard anything about like work ethic, but to the point you're talking about, that clip that went viral with the Cowboys wide receivers coach, through, it was 20 games of Jalen Hyatt's career, that scouting report looks pretty dead on. Like, kind of all you can do is run fast. I mean, you think about last year, I mean, he had some big plays, wasn't a lot of nuanced route running. But they gave him some goal balls there, and he'd have a game or two where it'd have, 2 40-yard catches, and then you wouldn't hear from him for 5 weeks. And that's just kind of who he was as a rookie. I think there was hope that coming into year 2, having off-season time to develop, that he would blossom into more. And here's why I cannot criticize the Giants or get really worked up about this topic in terms of the playing time. They gave him every chance in training camp to be the number 2 wide receiver. Like, he got more reps than Slayton. I mean, with Slayton, I think Slayton was probably a little annoyed, but also could say, like, all right, I'll just wait this out, because he's a known commodity. He doesn't need every rep in camp. He knew that. The team knew that. So they gave Hyatt all of this runway, and it's just who he was last year. He's just inconsistent. Like, he can definitely take the top off the defense, and that's valuable. Listen, if that's all he becomes, there's still value to that. What he brought as a rookie, if he does that for the rest of his career, he'll have a long career, because you can always just have a 4th or 5th wide receiver who's a threat, on a play action, and a 50-yard bomb, like John Ross. I remember he stuck around for how long? But obviously, you traded up in the 3rd round to get this guy. There was talk at the time what a steal the Giants got, but this is why he was available in the 3rd round, because people were skeptical that he could be more than just that. And again, I feel like the Giants, they handled it perfectly. He's a young player. You have a vet who so you can try to give the young player every opportunity, because it'd be better for the Giants long term if Jalen Hyatt seizes that job in year 2 and just his career takes off. Slayton's going to be a free agent after this year. I think the odds are he won't be back, but you have to play the best players. So when it becomes obvious that Slayton is just still a better player than Hyatt, they make that change. Now, in the Texans game, was it that on that interception, Daboll didn't feel like Hyatt fought for the ball enough? I mean, just go back to his press conference yesterday. Malik Nabers did a couple of supernatural things. The first thing Daboll goes to is Nabers breaking up that interception when Jones got hit. So, like, maybe that's a real big point of emphasis for Daboll, and it pissed him off that, even though the throw wasn't great, that Hyatt didn't really do anything to break up the interception. I don't know exactly, what was the kind of final straw. But again, I was at camp every day. Like, Hyatt did not seize the job. I think Slayton's a better player. He obviously has the track record. He has the rapport with Daniel Jones, which is an interesting comment Hyatt made a few times. He's like, well, it's about what Daniel's comfortable with. So maybe Daniels went to the coach like, listen, I can't have this guy out here on 3rd down. I don't know what route he's going to run. Whereas with Slayton, I have that built-in comfort level. Right. So, whatever it was, like, they made that decision. I mean, Slayton hasn't lit the world on fire. It's kind of been pretty much been Malik Nabers and not much else from this passing game. And somehow that's almost been enough. But yeah, I think Hyatt's still going to get his shots, but he's going to have to really make the most of them, because, he didn't when he had all those reps in the summer. So now it's going to be, you're going to get a deep shot here and there. They tried one yesterday. Everyone in the world knew that was coming, if you're aware.
Yeah.
How Dave Roberts,
nothing
more than a 50-yard TD. And, they could, hug it up in front of the cameras, but of course they couldn't connect. But yeah, so I think that, again, that scouting report, to bring it full circle, so far it looks quite accurate. And again, he's a young player, maybe it changes, but again, even if he's just there's still some value to that. It's just not what you were hoping or expecting when they traded up for him.
And not make the harp on Hyatt too much here, but this is related to that. So we had Connor Hughes on last week, and he cautioned us not to make too much out of anything the coaches say in a press conference and take it with a grain of salt. I brought up Hyatt with him, that Grow earlier in the summer had high praise for his progress. And Grow, to me, always came across as a guy that doesn't really throw out a lot of kind words to people. I mean, he seems to me that he's very reticent to say a lot of positive things. So I really was, oh, great, Hyatt's doing well. But when you listen to the position coaches on the team, do you take their comments at face value, or are there guys that you listen to more than others? Because it seems like, from my personal opinion, I seem to get more out of the position coach than I do from listening to the head coach or the coordinators oftentimes, because their answers seem to be a little more honest to me.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, obviously, I think there's a range of personalities on any staff, right. And some guys very much just walk the line. Like, Mike Kafka hasn't said anything interesting in 3 years.
No.
He's one you can check your phone when he's at the podium. Whereas, obviously Wink was colorful. Shane Bowen has been super open. Like, I asked him a question last week about the cushion they were giving against Washington, because I think that was a big thing that, on the outside, a lot of people picked up on. And I thought he would just kind of give me some blah, 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 it's a game plan decision. He went into detail, and that's so appreciated, because, obviously we don't know as much as these guys. And I understand that, that they're going to be protective. They don't want to give a competitive advantage. The thing I always come back to, I had a coach tell me this one time. There's nothing I can say in a press conference to the opposing staff that's spending 16 hours a day watching film. Like, oh, wow, I didn't think of that. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of insulting to even think that, like, oh, I don't want to tip them off to like why we played off coverage there. I'm pretty sure they could figure it out. But so yeah, to your question with the position coaches, grow. I would describe his personality as a little bit prickly. So
Yes,
maybe when he was given Hyatt the flowers, it's because he knew things were a little sensitive and he's trying to pump his guy up because, you still have to, I think you have to know which buttons to push with certain guys. And maybe with Hyatt, if things were in a negative place, it was like, hey, I'm going to, pump this guy up. I think some position coaches are much better than others, and there's a lot of new ones. So we haven't talked to some of the new ones as much. I'm thinking off the top of my head. Jerome Henderson is always good. I think he's a guy who's been around so long. He's very secure. Because I think some assistant coaches are just scared to cross that. They don't want to get called in the principal's office for saying something in a press conference, which is understandable. So especially for a young one, I'm not going to create any waves. I'm just going to say nothing and get out of here and go about my day. Whereas I think Jerome kind of enjoys the banter and isn't afraid to kind of say stuff or just be honest with you, which again, that's really what we're driving for. So he's definitely the best. Because he's been around, for a number of years now. So I feel like a pretty good relationship with him. Like Andre Patterson, he's usually pretty candid. I mean, he's usually pretty positive, but he'll kind of still kind of tell like it is. The offensive staff is a lot of new faces there, right? Yeah. So
they're all on
a feel for those guys. Like Shea Tierney is very much like Daboll's guy. He's going to kind of walk the company line. But yeah, it's great to get access to those guys though, because sometimes you get them. I think you probably see the Giants clip up the interviews and put on. But they're also out there. You can talk to them just off to the side, one-on-one. So it's a good way to just kind of fill in some gaps sometimes. So you can't ask every question to the head coach in his 8-minute press conference. So if you have something very specific about someone maybe further down the depth chart, those are valuable. But yeah, I would say it's anything in a press conference setting you have to take with a grain of salt, because usually there's a motive or a reason about why the messaging is what it is. Particularly with Daboll, everything with him is very calculated, and so I think some of the assistants just sort of follow his lead.
So I'll try to we'll keep it tight because you're giving us your time. I appreciate it. The one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and since you started talking about the assistant coaches, there was obviously a little bit of the report last year that there was friction between Daboll and Wink, and we've kind of asked other people the same thing, and it didn't seem to be as widely known outside the locker room for whatever reason. There was something, but whatever. My question though is Daboll with Kafka, since Kafka doesn't really, when he does talk, it's pretty boring. That relationship though, you brought him in, he's the offensive coordinator. You've now taken the play calling away. How do you see that relationship right now? And what has Daboll's taking the play calling for you, at least from what you've seen, what has that brought to not only the Giants offense, but Jones in particular?
So wait, you asked me about their relationship, or you're asking about the impact on the field?
Kind of both. First, the relationship with Kafka, and then kind of how that has changed the relationship with the offense overall under Daboll now being the guy.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I mean, the relationship, like, let's just be honest. Like, you can look at any work relationships you would have. So he came here from, the best place to be in the league. You're working on Andy Reid, you're going to the Super Bowl every year. Obviously, the carrot was to call plays, come to the New York market. It would boost your profile, and you're on the fast track to being a head coach. 1 year, it looked like check, like he's getting all these head coaching interviews. It was like, it seemed like everything went according to plan. Didn't obviously get a job. Comes back year 2, was not good. And, he still got a couple head coaching interviews last year, which surprised me. He's got a great reputation or a great agent, because I was surprised coming off of having like one of the worst offenses in the league. He still found himself in demand. But yeah, I know Daboll took play calling away at times. Pat Leonard had a pretty explosive report that it was multiple times. Even Shea Tierney called it one time, and I have not heard anyone refute that. So I can't sit there and say that's my reporting, but it seemed like that was never pushed back against, and I think they would have if it was untrue. So it was obviously a volatile situation. I think the Wink relationship was much more combative because just the personalities involved. Again, like Mike is a very reserved guy. He's a lot younger in his career. I think Wink had a I don't give a what attitude because he's 60 and it kind of is what it is. Whereas Kafka, he has a long career ahead of him. He's not going to be burning any bridges. So listen, I think if they said, hey, you can go interview for that Seattle Seahawks offensive coordinator job, it would have been see you later. Obviously, they didn't want to lose all 3 coordinators at once. I don't want to go too far back into stuff in the past. I'm sure that you guys have discussed this before, but so obviously then you're going to keep them. but it's a tough look to just block him when, he wants out, you're going to take over the play calling. So they give him the assistant head coaching title, which is like just the ultimate, like, makeup gift. Like, hey, here's the title. I'm sure some more money came with it. Like, but like, it's kind of funny. He got a promotion again off of overseeing, I think, what, like 31st in offense last year. He gets a promotion off of that.
Right.
And then also gets a reduced role, though. They take away his primary duty. So again, that was a long answer to, I don't think that relationship is great. But I also think Kafka is very professional, and I don't think it's like they're fighting or anything. I just think, I'm sure he doesn't love how things have worked out here. Year one, like I said, it probably seemed like, oh, this was a great move to come here. I wonder if he still feels that way. So the way I looked at his situation, I would think this is his last year here, one way or the other. I mean, if Daboll gets fired, obviously he'd be gone. If Daboll stays and they have a good year, I'm sure Kafka will be just kind of looking to get out. So it's like I have a hard time seeing like why Kafka would re-up for another year, and even Daboll, if he's back, there'd be some stability here. He could probably just say, okay, Mike, I'll let you go explore a lateral move or whatever it may be. So again, that was a long answer. To the on the field stuff, I think it's been a good thing for Daboll to get back to the play calling. When he took the job, I think he spoke to more like defensive coaches who said, you don't want to be having your head in the play sheet. Like, just step back, be the CEO. And again, it worked pretty well in 2022. But I think once things start going off the track, it's like, wait a second, like if I'm going to go down, I want to be the one steering the ship.
Right.
And so obviously he took back that control, and he's cited this fact many times of like, you go around the league, pretty much every offensive head coach calls plays. So it's not like he's like doing something that's foreign. And there's obviously a lot of guys in the Super Bowl every year, Shanahan, Reed, McVay, that do it successfully, Peyton. So I think he just realized like, all right, I took that advice out of the gates, but again, this is obviously an important year for him. I'm going to take it back. And I do think it's been good for him. I mean, I think he is an excellent play caller. I mean, listen, that's why he got this job. So it'd be kind of crazy if he was to lose it without ever doing, with maybe his best or most important skill set, which was calling plays, for those 4 years in Buffalo. They didn't go off to the fastest start, but I do think, the game planning against Cleveland was excellent. I think, there's probably still some personnel limitations, but I think, I have trust that he'll figure it out. And I think it's a net positive. But again, it's like the buck stops with him. There's no one to blame if it doesn't work out, because, he has taken that control.
Have you noticed any change in his demeanor in the press conferences? Because that's come up a few times from other fans. I haven't really picked up on that, but some people have said he sounds different this year.
How so? Like, I'm curious.
Well, yeah, I was curious. They basically, and again, I made one of those cases where people are reading the things that they want to see, but they've said he sounds more defeated or subdued, like he thinks he knows he's on his way out. Now, I haven't picked up on that, but I thought maybe I'm being too positive about this. I was just curious, because you guys see him every single day and you listen to every word that comes out of his mouth. I would think that if there was something there, you guys would have talked amongst yourselves and said, he doesn't sound like the same. I mean, he looks like the different guy because he lost all the weight. I was just curious if you've noticed anything, because it has come up with, I haven't pushed back on it, but I haven't picked up on it.
That's why I was curious what you're going to say, because now I've got that vibe at all. I mean, I think, he's more fiery, if anything. Like you saw after that Washington game when he got the question about his job security and he did the debt stare. I mean, he doesn't ever let that out, and he hasn't had any Joe Judge rants or anything like that, but he's more apt to go that way. If there's going to be a memorable Daboll press conference, it'll probably be because he's going to snap one of these days, because I think it's always bubbling under the surface, but he's done a good job suppressing it. I think, again, I used the word calculated earlier. I think he's aware that his predecessor kind of talked his way out of town in that post-game presser in Chicago. And so I'm sure he's very well aware, like, I can't make the same mistakes. It won't look good to ownership. So it's funny, after that tough loss in Washington, he took a long time to come in for the press conference. I'm sure he was doing some yoga breathing or whatever he needed to do to make sure he projected a calm demeanor. And the thing I'll say about him and pressers overall, I think he's remarkably consistent. And I mean, listen, I wish he gave more, but the thing I can respect about it is there's nothing worse than a coach, when they lose, they come in and they grumble 2-word answers. But then when they win, they're giving soliloquies and telling all these anecdotes about, in practice, like, he's pretty much gives very little every day. And so I at least respect that, because I don't like a front runner in a press conference. There's certain players who, when they win, they're standing at their locker. When they lose, they're sneaking out the back door. I think Daboll, to his credit, even when they win, he kind of keeps it's just one game, kind of keeps a even keel. And so that way, when he does that, when he loses, I can't say he's changing, because it's just kind of how he conducts himself in pretty much every presser.
So I know we'll wrap it up on this because we took your time, and I again really appreciate it. You covered over the weekend. Here you are on Monday. So going into this game coming up on Thursday, right? If we had lost to the Browns, there might be a whole different feeling coming into Thursday night's game, especially Dallas night game. The crowd very easily, we talked about this, it could easily be heavily Cowboy fans, even at the start of the game, but certainly by mid portion of the game if it was going sideways. And that would be a very ugly look for John Mara. How much of the pressure of that game now has been lessened because they did pull that win out with the Browns? And then how much of that pressure can be kind of lessened a little bit more, whether they win or lose, but look respectable on Thursday, something they have not done against Dallas in a while?
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right on it, because if they had lost that Cleveland game, I mean, Thursday night would have been like, the Armageddon. Like, I mean, because the whole report about like losing the locker room, if they got blown out yesterday and then got blown out Thursday, if you're losing the locker room, he could be losing the people up in the owner's suite. Right. So that win was huge just to stabilize things. It was kind of like with Jones after week 1 when he looked so skittish and so bad. It was like, if he looked like that against week 2, we're going to be talking about a quarterback change. Even although week 2 he didn't play unbelievable, they didn't win. He looked okay. He was confident. Like, he looked like a functional quarterback. And again, he was a little bit better yesterday. So that's kind of what that win yesterday did. Just kind of calmed things down a little bit. So to your point, on Thursday night, obviously a win. I mean, man, people are going to have that long weekend. They're going to be start looking, like scoreboard watching. We're in first place in the NFC East. Like, all that'll be happening. And hey, that's fine. If they get blown out, let's be honest, it's going to go right back. It's going to be definitely 5 again. Because I'll be interested to see how the home crowd responds, because listen, they got booed after the second offensive play of the season. So there was not the grace being afforded. It's like a rookie tight end. It dropped the pass and they're getting booed. Quarterback coming back from the long layoff. There was very little grace. So whatever goodwill they earned, with Sunday's win, I'll be curious to see the shelf life of that. But also to your point, even if they don't win, if they lose, 27-24 and they play pretty well, I think that the temperatures will kind of remain kind of calm. But I think if they get blown out, it's right back to, as bad as it would have been. But coming in, at least things are settled. Because if they lost yesterday, 0-3 come into that game, national TV against a team that's really owned them for the last, gosh, I don't even know how many years, it would have had a chance to get really ugly this week.
So why don't I know people know, but tell everybody where they can follow you, both on X or on The Athletic. Anything else you want to throw in there, and then we'll wrap it up for you.
Yeah, so Twitter, if you haven't already muted you, it's it's DDuggan21, and then I mean, obviously The Athletic. That's where my more substantive work is housed. So I mean, hopefully, it's a lot of your readers, hopefully your subscribers, and so that's the 2 main ways to kind of follow me, get in touch with me, and kind of consume my my work.
Nice. Well, I'll put that all in the description. And so Dan, again, I appreciate your time, and hopefully we've got something cool to talk about going forward with Thursday night. But either way, you do a great job. We appreciate you taking the time to come on.
Thanks. Appreciate it, guys.
All right. So guys, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. All right, we are back, and first off, thank you to Dan Duggan of The Athletic coming in. That was awesome. Eric, we got to ask some good questions. We got a lot of in-depth kind of thought process on a number of things, but awesome that Dan could take the time and join us.
Yeah, and he's great to follow on X/Twitter if you don't, because his Twitter feed is filled with fantastic stuff. Like I mentioned to him when we were offline with him, he does a snap count every Monday after the game, but he has analysis of it, and I always post it, copy and paste it, and put it on the site because it's so good. So he's one of the quality guys covering the team, and I recommend following him if you don't.
Nice. So let's wrap up the review of the game overall. We both think they obviously played better. I think it's not a tale of 2 halves per se. I think the second half was just a little bit different. There was just a couple of missed things, but overall, as you brought up, the intensity was there, the aggression was there the whole time. Just a couple things didn't play out. So I kind of wanted to do, and this is, if you've been on BBI, you will know the reference, but we're going to do a Megan Fox thumbs up or thumbs down player of the game. And I'll start first on my thumbs up, my Megan Fox thumbs up player. I'm going to go with Azeez Ojulari, a guy who's been a little bit maligned in a way. He's kind of underperformed, been injured, and didn't show a lot this summer. When the opportunity was kind of there, he kind of came up a little flat. This game, I saw a guy beating tackles regularly, doing a lot of really good body positioning, a lot of good lean, getting under the much taller tackles, getting underneath them and putting the pressure on. And if he can do that consistently, that takes a whole lot of pressure off us having just two guys who can be worn out. And we can even go to, I don't want to dip into the old days, but we could dip into a NASCAR package where you could have three really good pass rushers along with Lawrence, and we can really change the way. I thought Azeez Ojulari had a really good game.
There are so many people that are going through my head right now. So you sent me this email earlier in the day about picking the player of the game and the dud of the game.
And to be fair, earlier wasn't that much earlier. I
didn't see it until I just got on. So I haven't even thought about this. But as I was thinking about this while you were talking, I'm going through that. There are so many players on offense and defense. I mean, how do you not pick Malik Nabers based on what he did? And then you could say Brian Burns not only had the play, perhaps the defensive play of the game, but he was steady throughout, making an impact on it. Dexter Lawrence was all over the field. But I'm going to say something. I'm going to give it to somebody because I've been so harsh on him, and I'm going to try to be fair. And I think I did not expect him to play as well as he did against this defense as Daniel Jones. I'm going to give it to Daniel Jones because I think going 17 of 19 against that defense is nothing to sneeze at. And he did not, he did the things you need to do to win a game, and he did not lose the game. People will point, well, he had that almost interception. Again, I'm going to put the caveat that might have been on Theo Johnson. And I think there were just a couple of things that went against them in the second half, or the numbers would even been better. But I think he's played two good games in a row. I'm going to give credit where credit's due. But I will say this: you could give it to Dexter, you could give it to Malik Nabers, and a whole bunch of other people. You could go down the defensive front and you can give it a number of people, like you did with Azeez.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, you could pick just any of those guys that are just obvious answers. And Malik, yes, I could have easily picked him. Azeez brought something though to the table that we haven't had. Didn't have that third guy, and to see him perform, and that really brings. So that's kind of where I went with that. Thumbs down on the other side. This one is going to be a little bit obvious in a way. Eric Gray, to me, just as the returner, and I don't want to blame Eric Gray, the player. I don't think it's his fault that he's being asked to return kicks. I just don't think it's his skill set. But you cannot fumble the ball. It's the opening kickoff of the game. You cannot fumble that ball. So you've got to secure it. You got to have it. And I just think what he brings as a kick returner, it's just not there. So in some ways, I feel bad that I'm saying it because I don't think it's all his fault, minus the fumble. But overall, there's just no spark coming from that. So I'm going to go, well, that's where I'm going to go with the down.
The number one thing you don't want any returner to do is to turn the ball over. Right. So why did Phil McConkey return punts for the Giants forever? It wasn't because he was a dynamic punt returner. It's because he caught the ball. He didn't fumble. Parcells would not tolerate dropping the ball. So that was the big sin Eric Gray did, is you got to hold on to the ball. And it wasn't like, this is where my difference, again, with the people saying, why is he returning the ball? Again, to me, that was a turnover, not like the muff thing, like we talked earlier. That was almost like a running back fumble play. Like you got to protect the football there. So that wasn't one of these things where he dropped the ball. He couldn't field it or anything like that. He had the ball. He was running around up the field, and somebody got their shoulder on the ball and it came loose. He's got to hold on to the football. So I think that's a good pick. In a game where I don't think you can find, like, Sy does his 3 studs and 3 duds. And I always wonder, when there's horrific losses, how does he come up with 3 studs? And when there's, really good wins, how do you come up with 3 duds? I think sometimes you have to force an exercise. So I think Eric Gray is a good pick there. I don't know. I feel like I can't say Eric Gray too, can I? I'll say this. I'll say, and it's another guy that I defended, but he's got to turn around and play the ball. I'll say Ty Banks. I think he's getting more grief than he probably should, but at the same time, you've got to, if you're going to be the guy, if you're going to be a quote unquote shutdown corner, which he's not yet, you've got to turn around and play the football. So he got burned on that touchdown, not because he was out of position, but he didn't turn around and play the football. And there was another play similar to that later on in the game on the sideline where he was right with the receiver too. I think it was Cooper again.
Yes.
And he the touchdown, the other short touchdown you can also put in there too. I think Cooper lulled him to sleep on that with a little, so he kind of lazily came off the line and then exploded.
Yeah. Yep.
And it looked like it caught him off guard. Again, you can't, so I'm going to put Ty Banks as that doesn't mean I don't think he's a good player. I just don't think he played a great game.
Yeah, and I mean, we are talking, one game scenarios. The one thing I'll say about Banks, it's becoming a pattern. I think technically he's pretty sound. He gets to where he needs to be. He has good speed. He covers. He's with his man. He just tends to have no idea where the ball is when it's arriving. And you got to look back, or you got to be looking at the receiver. And when his hands go up, you got to go into where the ball is. He's very late in responding on where the ball. He's right in position, but the ball is just there.
Well, it's been both. So like in the second half, there were a couple plays, though he made really good defensive plays on the ball. Like the last play, I think the fourth down play was, I think that was against him. He was right there across the middle.
But he is covering a tight end, though.
Yeah, but he still made the play. But again, he was playing the ball.
True. All right.
What I'm saying is he was there and he was playing the ball. He wasn't playing the man. So, and there were a couple of plays like that in the second half where he was playing the ball and he wasn't playing the man. So that's the kind of inconsistency that we saw from him in this particular game. We'll have to see. He's a very young player. The good news is this: he's big, he's physical, he's fast. He doesn't get down. He doesn't get negative. He doesn't get down on himself, and then it becomes an issue. That we've had defensive backs on this team before that once they get beat, they get beat again and they get beat again. I don't worry about that with him. If he gets beat by a Dallas receiver on Thursday night, knock on wood, he will forget about that and move on and do well the next play. So that's what you want in a corner. Talking about the Dallas game, we'll have to talk about that later this week, but we're going to have issues at cornerback in that game because of the injury situation. So,
well, and speaking of later this week, we will be able to talk to a former cornerback of the New York Giants. Mark Collins will be on with us later this week, so we can ask some of these questions to Mark. We'll do our Cowboys preview a little bit later this week as well. So other than that, I mean, I'm happy we won. I know some people are like they're chanting 0-16 and lighting their 0-16 or 0-17 candles. Sorry. It ain't going to happen. They're not going to lose. They're going to win a few more games. I'm hoping more than a few. This league is parity is what they've always wanted, and parity is what they have. The difference between the 22 Giants and where they went and this team has got more talent than that 22 team. They just need to play like it. I think the opposition is coming back, as we talked about before. These games are important, and they're more important than people think. You can't lose year after year and keep talking about the rebuild that never actually happens, because losing becomes just so easy. If it were just simple, Carolina would have been better already. They've had high picks already. Other teams, Houston took forever. Yes, they had to get a quarterback, but they've had multiple high picks for a number of years and didn't get anywhere. It took the right combination. You have to start winning somewhere. And by the way, they won the last game of that season that cost them the number one pick in the draft. Did it hurt them? No. Giants in 1981, did not having the number one pick in the draft hurt them? No. They might have actually taken George Rogers if they sat at number one. Thank God Rogers was gone, and they got LT. You never. Sometimes it works the way it works, but you've got to win. This team has to win. They can't just keep losing. And yesterday was a good opportunity. They took it. They won on the road. Now we'll see what happens this coming week. So.
Yeah, well, the Giants have something that they haven't had in years. Provided everyone stays healthy up front, they've got an offensive line.
Yeah.
And a lot of teams in the NFL don't have an offensive line. And what did we say since we started this podcast? If they got acceptable quarterback play, this offense has a chance to be at least average and
Right.
perhaps above average. I don't think we're thinking great, but we're thinking we can score more than 20 points. We maybe someday we'll hit 30. Who knows? Well, but if you have an offensive line, you can run the ball. That's the thing of it. I saw people today saying, "Oh, I hate seeing Barkley run with the Eagles." We knew this was going to happen.
Sure.
We talked about that. But again, the trade-off was to get the offensive line. We saw what Barkley was like without an offensive line. Now we got Singletary, and I've been happy with that. So we got that. The question moving forward was yesterday an anomaly with the defense? If it wasn't, then this team is going to be not going to be a terrible football team, because if you're going to play defense and you have an offensive line, you're going to be in games. You're just going to be in. So there's going to be, so anyone thinking, but if the defense is a problem like it was in the previous 2 weeks, then all bets are off. So we'll have to see. Dallas is going to be a great test. The only thing I wish we were going in that more healthy than we are. We'll have to see what the injury report is this week, but calf injuries can linger, and we've got 2 corners right now with calf injuries. Adoree Jackson once again gets hurt. That was the negative with him, besides him going down in play last year, was the guy always gets hurt, and he's hurt again. They sign him and he's hurt again. So,
well, the one thing, and we'll wrap it up, I will say Cordell Flott did not play that bad.
Oh, he did.
And he played a lot of snaps.
Game. Yes, and they threw at him, and he did all right. So Cordell actually played a decent game yesterday. I'm glad you actually mentioned that.
And hopefully,
Pinnock had a big rebound game too.
Yes. And hopefully McLeod, maybe he can be healthy enough to play this week. Hawkins was inactive, but we could make him active. We're not going to be bare at the receiver level or at the quarterback level. But again, Dallas has always been, and we'll talk about that on that preview show, but that's a tough test.
But we can beat them this year. Based on what we've seen, we can beat them now.
And it's always a mental thing too, though. Sometimes to become that team, you've got to, it's not necessarily getting over the physical part or the whatever. It's that mental piece of, we always lose to these guys. And the Giants of the early 80s had that plenty of times. When they finally beat Dallas in 81, still took a little bit more, but it started to turn. And when they beat them in 84 to start, that was the big change. All of a sudden they beat Dallas, and Dallas is that team right now.
I'm going to give you another 80s reference. So we're to them now as the St. Louis Cardinals used to be to us and the rest of the actually St. Louis Cardinals used to give some teams in the division trouble, but they didn't ever give the Giants trouble. So except early on when they were, that's one of the things we can talk to
Mark.
Oh, there was another guy I was going to spill the beans on who you're working on. I'm not going to say it.
Yes.
I don't want to spoil something. So we may have another guest where we can talk about this. But right now we're basically the St. Louis Cardinals to Dallas. Using that analogy, the Cowboys, we're their get well team. So we have to change that.
Yeah. So we'll have that on the preview, but other than that, I think we'll wrap it up. The Giants with a 21-15 win, solid game on both sides of the ball. Even the coaching was pretty solid. No major gaffes that I saw. Special teams still worries you when their new backup kicker comes in and misses a field goal. Happens, whatever. Overall, his kickoffs were good. I thought extra points were good. So, we'll see, but he didn't commit to him this week. So that's something we'll have to pay attention to.
No, he didn't. I think we may have a new kicker.
We'll have to pay attention to that as the week goes on. But other than that, it was finally good to have a win to talk about. And, we're going to, you'll like the title of this episode anyway. Overall, you'll have already seen it if you're looking at this. I won't say it here for your sensitive ears. But Eric, we'll end it there, and we'll catch up with Mark Collins, and then our preview of the Cowboy game later this week.
Yeah, good week. So we got a win, and we got Mark Collins coming on, so it'll be fun.
All right, folks. So thanks for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll catch you again later.